Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Is it the nincompoop or the Nincompoopery that makes customers hate you? We'll find out today from our guest, John Brandt. John, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Bill, thanks for having me.
Now, I have to explain to our audience, because they may not be familiar with that word. The title of your book is one word, Nincompoopery. So my first question is, can you explain that title to our guests, to our audience?
Absolutely. Nincompoopery is the corporate stupidity that all of us deal with every day and often in our own companies, and sometimes we create it ourselves, where we do things, we have a process set up where the customer doesn't get what they want, and they're irritated, and we're irritated, and we lose money, et cetera, et cetera. Great example of this would be you take your car to the car dealership. You want to get it fixed. You wait there for 2 hours, you're driving home, you go, oh my gosh, the car is not fixed. So you're faced with this choice. You go back, and you got to wait again, or you got to drive an unsafe car. And you're irritated, and you think, well, this mechanic must be a nincompoop. And the dealership has lost money and time. They got to do the repair again, and the mechanic probably gets yelled at by a boss who probably thinks he's a nincompoop, or she's a nincompoop. But the issue is, most of the time when we actually analyze when we don't get what we want from a company, or when we don't deliver what we should deliver to a customer, it is not the nincompoop, it's the nincompoopery. And what I mean by that is, it is this way that we have set up our companies, or the way companies are set up that service us, that actually prevent us from getting customer value. What if that mechanic, instead of being trained just on technical skills, had been trained on process improvement or collaboration, or maybe a simple thing like using a checklist? That mechanic then would not feel like a nincompoop, wouldn't be treated like one. We'd have gotten what we wanted. Everybody would be happier, and the dealership would make money. But most of the time, we deal with people, and we have companies ourselves where we know something's wrong, but we just let it go. That's what I'm talking about. Now,
you explain in your book, and you say one of the problems is that nobody seems to be able to overcome tradition, inertia, and apathy. Who are you talking about there, and can you give us an example of what you mean by that?
I'm talking about, it is human nature to want to fall into routine, and typically when nincompoopery, corporate stupidity rules at a company, it's really the leader's fault. You can't let employees off the hook because they could quit. They could say, hey, let's do something differently. They could try to do something differently themselves. But the big issue here is we fall into routines. We get comfortable with the way things are, and sometimes we get that nagging feeling, man, this just doesn't work the way it should. And yet we don't do anything about it. And the problem with that is that that's bad enough. It gets even worse when, how many times, Bill, have you heard somebody say about their company or something, they go, this would be a great business if it weren't for the customers. Our customers are really, it'd be a great business because our customers are cranky and they're stupid. And you know what? The issue is the customers are cranky. They're not stupid. They are actually trying, especially when they complain, they are trying to help you. They are saying, we care about you, we care about what you do enough that we would like you to fix it so it would be better so you can make money and you can help us. And I think what we see at companies where this really happens badly is when leaders, for whatever reason, stop listening. They're either actively suppressing any dissent or complaints because they don't want to hear about it, they don't want to think they're not perfect, or they don't want to deal with it, or they just have gotten inured to it, and they can't hear it anymore, and they aren't talking to customers. They're living in customer-free zones, the boardroom, any place where you don't talk to people who buy things from you, and that is so easy to do, and we see it over and over at companies, and that is one of the steps toward the road to hell in terms of your profitability and dealing with your customers.
I always want to know where that road was. I'm glad you just told me about it now.
It's right there. It is paved with not listening to your customers.
Now, John, you actually studied over 50,000 companies. Did I get that number right? Because that's a huge number.
It is. We've looked at. It's far north of that. We've talked to, surveyed, et cetera, well over 50,000 companies in industries ranging from heavy machinery to healthcare to pest control to beauty salons, you name it. And the interesting thing about it is that as different as all those industries are, when you look at them, you keep finding the same things over and over again among the companies that are doing great things. They are just thinking differently. They are managing things differently.
Now, John, also, I might be oversimplifying it by saying this, but is it as simple as listening to the customer's complaints, and maybe even if it's the kind of business where you can do this, having yourself or someone jot them down and then just fixing it?
Sometimes it is exactly that simple. It might be, we've looked at companies before where, literally they will have a production employee talk to a vendor, will have one of their shipping employees talk to a production employee, and they will talk once a week for 15 minutes. And they'll say something like, can you pack the parts in reverse order, because that's how we take them out and put them away. It could be just as simple as that, Bill. It also, though, is a little more complicated, because when you see companies that are doing really great things, one of the common things is that they actually make sure that every single employee goes out and meets a customer at least once a year. Because a lot of companies, it's only senior executives or sales representatives, and the companies doing great things are saying, okay, we want to have our employees go out, meet with customers, but not just meet with them, actually work alongside them. You want to work alongside them in their business, or if it's a consumer product, you want to be in their home, working, living with them, and seeing what are the frustrations they deal with. It's not taking them to the big game or taking them for a drink. It's actually going out and seeing what their frustrations are, because what you find is that it may be vastly different than what you think. One of the trends we see over and over again, with innovation right now, is that customers are telling us, if we would just listen, that value is much broader than it used to be. We used to think if you made a good product, you made a good service, that was enough. Well, yeah, everybody does that now. Or if they don't, they're going to go out of business. What customers want to know is, can you solve multiple problems for me, including maybe integrating a package of value that includes your products, your services, with those of ancillary services, maybe even your competitors, because our customers are just as stressed and worried and dealing with as many to-dos as we are. And what they want to know is, can you really understand what's going on with me and help me to manage that?
John, we want our audience to know something right now and help them to manage by telling them that. They're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Today our guest is John Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T. His book is entitled Nincompoopery, and just as you heard it, that's the way you spell it, why your customers hate you and how to fix it. John, is there a website where we can find out more, and where is the book available?
The book is available on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble. It's available everywhere. It's got wide distribution, so, have at it. And the website I think you should go to, just go to johnrbrandt.com. That's JOHNRBRANDT.com. And it will tell you how to buy the book. It will show you other stories of nincompoopry. You can submit your own stories of nincompoopry, because every one of us we've probably delivered it to people, and we have been subject to it. And it will allow you to, if you want to share, go ahead and do that.
John, just as a side story, in preparing for the show and being, mentally alert to nincompoopry, twice over the past week I was in a famous short order restaurant, and we've all been there many times, and not during a rush time at all. And of the 6 orders put in, including my own, during those 2 times, 4 of them came back inaccurate. And I'm watching that and I'm saying 4 out of 6, and they had to throw away the hamburger, and they threw away the cup they made my drink in because it was totally the wrong drink. And just what a waste of time, and how bad they looked. And the man next to me saying, how many times do I have to tell you this? This is, I ordered this, not that. You say
it is crazy. And the issue there, Bill, is it's easy to blame the person on the front line, but typically it's because they haven't set up a system that works there.
I agree with you.
I went to a fancy golf course, and they had a big thing, call on the 9th hole for your hot dog. I tried to order a hot dog at this fancy golf course I went to, and they said, I'm sorry, we don't have any buns. I said, really? I said, do you have any bread? And they said, yes. I said, that might be a substitute. But how do you run? Anyway.
You had to tell them, and I think your book could be just anecdotes as an offshoot of this book, because I'm sure now you have me looking. It's like when you're looking for a red car, almost every car appears to be a your red car.
Absolutely.
But now every time I go into a store or a short order place, I'm watching and I'm saying, oh, this is one for John. This is one. It definitely falls under the Nincompoopery. You would think most of us, at least the business people, especially if it's a smaller accounting office, dental office, practice, or even the short order place where there is an individual manager, would at least be alert to some of these things because their title is manager or foreman or head person or whatever. But you say we're our own worst enemy. Is there a reason? Don't we care, or do we just go blind to this stuff?
We actually do. I think what happens is, I mentioned before, we stop listening. We also stop looking. When you go to businesses, a lot of times people will just start making an assumption that everything is the way it always has been. Nothing ever changes in this industry. Nobody can fix this. I mean, a great example of this was several years ago, Starwood Hotels. In the hotel industry, hotels, believe it or not, one of the things that drives managers at hotel chains and hotels crazy is that they have to provide you with the individual soap, the little soap, all that stuff, because it's expensive. It's expensive to provide. It's expensive to clean, etc. And it can cost, at one point, it can cost up to $4 a day per room. Well, that's a lot of money, and they'd like to get rid of it. But the problem is that when you surveyed for years and years and years customers in an industry, and you said, hey, what would you think if we got rid of the individual soap? They would say, what are you talking about? I'm going to a nice hotel. I want my soap, because if you put it in a dispenser, that's like a truck stop. I don't want to take a shower in a truck stop if I'm buying a hotel room. And so for years and years, hotel chains were handcuffed by this. Starwood finally said, let's rethink this. Maybe customers aren't really understanding what we're talking about. And so they put in pump dispensers, but they branded it as Bliss, their Bliss Spa things. They had a nice fragrance, etc. Customers ended up loving it. And one of the things that we have to figure out is we have to stop thinking just the way we've always thought and take a look at how could we rethink this. And Steve Jobs had a great quote. He said, customers often don't know what they want till you show it to them. And a great example of that is back in the day, when the Sony Walkman first came out. I think it was 1979, something like that. Nobody knew they needed portable music. I mean, up until that point, if you wanted to listen to music, you got a transistor radio or a boombox, and you listened to music on the radio, and it was a public experience. The Sony Walkman changed the paradigm, which led to the iPod, the iPhone, various other smartphones, etc., and it changed the ability for us it was no longer necessarily a public experience at a concert or listening to a radio or watching TV. It became a personal experience where the fact that many of us can be on a subway car right now, all listening to our own music or our own podcast or our own radio show, Bill.
There you go.
Customers, it is unfair in some ways to ask customers to think of what they want next. You can ask them what their problems are, but the thing you're getting paid for is to figure out how to solve them for them and to create new value.
Now, when you say, and that leads us to the question, the customer's perception of value has shifted. What does that mean? Is there something going on in society? Are we looking for things faster, cheaper, less fattening?
We are always looking for that,
okay.
and especially that last one there. But for years and years and years, customers and us, we all thought that the value of something that you bought resided in that product or in that service. As a matter of fact, there was this big scam that many companies pulled for 20 years called quality. All of a sudden we started advertising, our product, our service is quality. We hit ISO 9000, ISO whatever. And people finally wised up and said, you mean the stuff you're selling us actually works? Like, that's awesome, but shouldn't that have been like sort of the basic part of getting in? And what customers keep telling us now is that value has a lot of other components. It has components about, for example, delivery. If you're delivering to consumers who need something the next day, if you're delivering to businesses who have put in an improvement methodology like lean, they are often working in a just-in-time basis where they have limited inventory. If you miss a shipment to them, the quality of that shipment and the timeliness of that might have been just as important as the quality of the product. People are looking for, in consumers and businesses, what are you adding beyond that? What are you wrapping around that product? Are you providing extra services? If for a consumer, it can be, are you providing data and information about our usage of that product, which allows us to be smarter in how we do it? Or for a business, it can be, Do you offer additional services? How difficult are you to work with? How does your IT system work with ours? How does your management system work? It could be as simple as, for a small company, we have a great hiring program. We have a great safety program. Can we share that with you? Increasingly, what people are looking for here, really and truly, are relationships. And, we have to be really careful about that, because a lot of businesses talk about building a relationship and it can verge on being overbearing or creepy. But what I mean by that is they want to know that you actually are trying to improve their life or improve their business by the value you're providing, and that you are interested in what they have to say, and that you are willing to provide something beyond that basic product.
John, we want to provide our audience with more information from you, our guest today, but at this point in the show, it's time for a break and to let our audience know that my name is Bill Horan. They're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. We'll be right back.
90.3 WHPC reminds you that if you ever wanted to be a teacher, the time is now.
So many of us thought about becoming teachers when we were little, but as we grew up, things changed. We decided to pursue other paths like nursing, architecture, even radio show hosting. Teachers today are taking learning far beyond the four walls of the classroom, transforming old subjects into new experiences.
And proving that greatness can be found even in everyday places. Find out more at teach.org.
A message from Teach, the Ad Council, and the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and today our guest is John Brandt, Brandt, and he's talking about his book, Nincompoopery. I just love saying that term, John. I think
it's like
so
it
great.
Never gets old, right? It never gets old.
Now, you talk about industry biases. Do people know what these what do you mean by that?
You tend to fall into a trap and think about, this is the way customer value has always been, there's no way to change this, etc. And yet, one of the things, when I work with a company, when we do research, etc., one of the things we find over and over again is that people generally learn more if they study an industry different than theirs, because they start to think they know everything about their industry, and they will typically find something in a different industry and say, that's really interesting. I wonder what we would do if we did that in our industry. Because the truth of the matter is, most great new ideas in an industry, it is not the first time it was ever thought of on the planet Earth or in the universe. It was stolen, or I guess we can say benchmarked now from another industry. I mean, we're seeing this right now in kind of interesting ways where Rolls-Royce and GE Aviation pioneered the idea years and years ago of, instead of an airline buying a jet engine, what they should do is they should just sort of lease it, which is kind of crazy when you think about the fact you're flying on this plane and the engines aren't actually owned by the airlines. They're being leased. But what that does, and the GE and Rolls-Royce pioneered this, it's called power by the hour, where they maintain ownership of it, and they are selling power by the hour. The airlines pay a certain amount. And why is that a great thing? Well, it's a great thing for the airlines because a capital expense turns into a variable expense, operating expense, which can go up or down depending on demand. If there's a recession, they can buy less. If they cut back on flights, etc. It's a great thing for them too, because since GE or Rolls-Royce or other jet engine makers are actually managing that over the long term, what happens then is that they are really incentivized to make sure that those engines are running well, and they can be serviced remotely, and that the maintenance is low cost, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the reason I bring that up is because you're starting to see this in other industries, like the packaging machinery industry and some other industries, where customers don't necessarily lease or even own it. It's just the machines or whatever sits at the customer's residence, or I'm sorry, at the customer's business, and the person who made it is responsible for its operation and charges on an hourly basis. And everybody wins in that equation. You see that with right now. Look at Apple in a variation of that, where people are not actually in some ways buying their phones. They're getting a phone and they get a guaranteed upgrade within a year or 2 years. And because think about it, an airline doesn't want to own an engine. They want a plane that flies. If you don't want a phone, you want to be able to text, access data, occasionally call, because calls are like one of the least used functions of phones these days. But it is. So, what does the customer really looking for? Are they trying to buy something, or are they trying to do something? And how do you help them do that?
John, I think it's on page 51 in your book. You talk about 3 main jobs when you're dealing with talent. What are those 3 main jobs?
So when you're dealing with talent, you really...
That's your workers. Am I correct when we say talent, the employees?
It employs people who work at your firm.
Okay.
You have 3 jobs, and the first job is you got to hire well. And that is a lot harder than it sounds, because if you're going to hire well, everybody gets focused on resumes or technical skills. And look, technical skills are really important. I mean, if you're running an airline or you're running a dealership and you got to have a mechanic, man, somebody's got to know how to fix things. But that's only part of it. When you look at companies who are doing great things, they are hiring for not just technical skills. They're hiring for smarts. They're hiring for diligence. They're hiring for passion, for enthusiasm, because we don't see right now, when you look at over these 50,000 companies or more, we don't see a model for businesses in the developed world that works really well, that isn't decentralized, that has decision-making close to production or close to the customer. In that model, you are putting so much trust in your employee. Man, you got to pick the right people. And that also means that your big talent job number 2 is you better train. We look at industries, and it's amazing. Sometimes we see industries where the average amount of training is 8 hours or less per year. I don't know how you stay in business if you do that. Because when you look at companies doing great things, they are typically training at 40 hours at least per employee per year, or 60 hours, or even 100 or more hours per year. And they're not training just on technical skills. They're training on collaboration, on improvement methodologies. They're training on finance. Because think about this, if you've got employees who are close to the customer, close to production, making financial decisions, don't you want them to be as smart as possible? And yet, we do in this country and other places, we do a terrible job of teaching economics and finance in our secondary education. And it is, how does somebody who doesn't know how to read an income statement or do an ROI calculation, how can you reasonably expect them to make great decisions for you? We see great companies training for that. And then the third big talent job is, if you have done the first 2 well, your job is to get the hell out of the way. Because
I would be good at that.
Well, it's an awesome job because if you've done the first 2, you literally have probably got people who know more about, not literally, you should have people who know more about their jobs, more about their customers, more about what they do than you ever will. And it is your job to go off and think big thoughts and find the next things.
John,
if you have to be managing every day there, you have screwed up one of the first 2 jobs.
Let's hope that's not the case. John, I'd like our audience to know, if they're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Our guest today is John Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T. His book is Nincompoopery, Why Your Customers Hate You and How to Fix It. John, can you tell us about the website and where we can find this book?
Yeah, you can find this book everywhere. It's on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's at all booksellers. If you want to find out more about the book, you should go to johnrbrandt.com. That's the author website with a photo of my big ugly face there, and that's JOHNRBRANDT.com.
And if anybody in business, if you're not interested in what we're talking about here, maybe that's why your business isn't doing that well, or you haven't given yourself a raise in a few years, or employees are leaving. It might be time, and this is a nice, easy read. It's one of those books that all of a sudden you're reading it and you say, oh my gosh, that's my dental office, that's my garage, that's my auto repair shop that he's talking about, meaning that the problems are the same that you're having, and this would give you an opportunity to get things fixed up. And listen, we're all in business. We want to be successful. We want the easiest work possible. John's done the work already. And John, in your book, you talk about the Boys and Girls Club. Why are they so important, and what is it that they do that's so good?
It is such a great. It's such a great example of an organization, and and I want to stress that a lot of what we're talking about, it doesn't apply just to businesses. It applies to any organization that is trying to create value, help people. In 2007, they had a big skills gap because they had a bunch of retirements that were about to happen, and this is a big group. I mean, they coordinate activities for 1,100 local groups at some more than 4,000 locations, and they were trying to figure out, how do we do this better? So they did what I love when I see organizations do. They took a step back. Instead of just moving forward, they said, well, let's analyze what we're doing. So they developed this assessment process. They measured 50 different components among all their local leaders and analyzed the data, and what they found is that there were 4 attributes for a leader of one of their local groups that correlated with really, really, really better performance. It was the ability to recruit an effective board, skill and development of revenue strategies, they called it an investor's mindset, meaning that they're thinking about, how do we create this, how do we build something sustainable for the future, and a leadership style that you could characterize as tenacity and persistence. So once they identified this, they created a leadership development system focused on those 4 components, and they ran 650 leaders from something like 250 locations through this training. And then afterward, they did the thing that most of us forget to do. They said, okay, well, we just put all this effort into it. Why don't we measure and see if it worked? And so they measured it. And the results they got were incredible. They had these groups that they had where they had the newly trained leaders outperformed across the board, and the program as a whole generated a return on investment of like 300%.
That's what we want. So if we can follow their advice, I think we're in good shape. Before we wrap up, we talked before the show. Tell us that story of the man who stood up in the meeting and was losing employees.
I was given a speech one time, and I was talking about the importance of training, because I am such a believer in the importance of training. So I had all these stats, and I'm doing the thing with the PowerPoint, whatever. This guy, it's a group, and this guy stands up, and he's a CEO of a company. He goes, hold on, let me stop you. He goes, you're talking about this training, as I've heard this before. He goes, let me tell you my experience. Our experience is that we tried training and it doesn't work, and here's why. Because every time we train somebody, as soon as they get good, somebody else hires them. So what we realized is that we just can't afford to train. And I'm standing there staring at this guy going, what am I going to say now? And another CEO pops up, and she looks over at him, and literally, I can't believe this is happening. She says, well, I got to tell you, that is about the best employee retention strategy I have ever heard in my life. We keep our employees so ignorant that nobody wants to hire them.
And, the sad thing about it, it's probably indicative of many companies that don't come out and say it, but that's kind of what they do.
They don't. People underestimate how important it is, and for the training itself, and also for what it tells employees about your commitment to them, and what it tells them about what you think about the importance of them to your business in the long term. It's so important.
John, we want to thank you so much. Again, we love that title, Nincompoopery, by our guest, John R. Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T. Real quick, the website? JohnRBrandt.com, JohnRBrandt, as in dog, T as in Tom.com. John, thanks for being with us. We'd like to let our audience know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.